There's a story told about a person who decides that they are going to break into a house one night so that he might steal something of great value. So as he's walking in the pitch-black living room, he hears a small voice. Jesus is watching you. Now he stopped for a moment and shook his head, dismissing what he thought must have just been an overactive conscience. And he takes a few more steps, and once again he hears that voice. Jesus is watching you. Again, he dismissed it. The third time he hears the voice, Jesus is watching you, he turns on his flashlight in the direction from which he hears the voice. And he sees a parrot who says, Jesus is watching you. Now the guy's a bit flustered and he doesn't know how to react, so he just asks the parrot, "What is your name?" And the parrot says, "My name is Moses." Now the robber says, "What kind of people name their parrot Moses?" And the parrot looks up and responds, "The same people who named their Rottweiler Jesus. Jesus is watching you." Now, given everything that's going on, I thought maybe we needed just a little bit of a laugh this morning. I want to thank you for laughing. My students never laugh at my jokes. So thank you very much. Those on the live stream, I'm sure you're rolling around on your couches in hilarity right now. But I also bring this up because I think it illustrates the invitation that our readings give us this Sunday. Jesus is watching us. Now, he's not watching us because he's looking for our every mistake or our every misstep. But Jesus is watching us out of great love. And Jesus is watching us because that's what he promised he would do. Perhaps a different way of saying it is Jesus is watching us because Jesus is always with us. And Jesus has promised that he will be with us in all moments of our lives. In the gospel today, we see the disciples who are in a boat. And it probably seems they probably felt that they were somewhat alone. Because they're being tossed about by the waves, the wind is strong, and they are in a horrible storm. They're scared, they're frightened, and they're probably wondering, where is Jesus? And as they're looking around out into the vast sea, they see what they think is a ghost. But no. It's none other than Jesus who is right there with them in the middle of the storm. And it is Jesus who gives those great words of comfort and peace to them. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." In that gospel, we see Jesus does not abandon his disciples in the midst of the storm, but he is right there in the thick of it. He is right there with them in the middle of the storm, walking towards them. Yes, Jesus is with them at all times. Now, I think we could say that the experience of the disciples is somewhat like our own experience right now. We find ourselves in the midst of a storm. We see the waves crashing in, and sometimes it feels that the wind is just too much. And I don't really need to probably list them, but I will. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're trying to figure out, some of us, how to return to school. There's racial tensions in our society. Partisan politics are out of control. There's an economic downturn. Jobs have been lost. In our lives right now, it is very stormy weather. There's uncertainty, there's confusion, there's anxiety, and probably even a little bit of depression around us. And I think it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to be scared because we are being tossed around. But just like those disciples and their own experience, in the middle of our own storm, Jesus is there. He's watching us. He's with us, and believe it or not, He's here to calm our storms. Now again, I don't want to dismiss anything of what we're going through, anything that we are feeling. But the gospel today, our readings today, remind us that even in moments of darkness, Jesus is with us. Even when we might be doubting, Jesus is with us. And even when it might seem that all hope is lost, Jesus is with us. Like those disciples in the boat, Jesus is walking towards us. Jesus wants to be beside us, and Jesus is still with us, even when it might not seem like He is there. But He is. He is there with us in the midst of the storms of our lives simply because He cares for us, because He loves us, and because He promised that He would be with us. And we know that Jesus is always faithful. Now, the presence of the Lord, it might not be as dramatic as the gospel. We might not think that we are seeing a ghost. But maybe we see the presence of the Lord a little bit more like Elijah did. If we pause and we listen, maybe we will hear that small voice. Maybe we will hear the whisper of the Lord in our heart, I am with you. Or maybe we will come to know the Lord's presence, maybe through community, maybe through some experience we have. At any moment, if we just cry out, Lord, save us, I believe that we will find Him right there in our midst. Because even in the midst of the storm, even when the waves are crashing in and the wind is so strong, we have that promise that Jesus will be with us. Now, there's something else in the gospel that I think we need to pay attention to. Jesus is with us at all times, but it doesn't mean that we should just sit back and not do anything. Now, I get it. There are many times the last several months I have said, I want to find a really big rock, and I want to go and hide underneath it, and I'll come out when everything's over. But the gospel leads us to something else. In the gospel, Jesus calls Peter to walk out into the storm. He calls Peter to walk out into the water. And what happens? When he stumbles, when it seems as if he is going to sink, Jesus is there reaching out His hand, lifting him up. Jesus is there in the midst of the storm. It's the same with us. Jesus invites us to walk out into the storm, not so that it might engulf us, not so that it might empower us, but so that we can walk continuously towards Him, so that we might have our eyes fixed on Him, trusting that if we do falter, He will be there to raise us up. Maybe we're being invited to walk out in the midst of a storm by reaching out to the lonely or those who are in need. Maybe we're out in the storm by standing with those who are marginalized, by having empathy with those who are victimized. Maybe we walk into a storm when we choose we're going to stay at the table, we're going to enter into dialogue instead of yelling at each other. Maybe it's even when we are asked to wear masks or distance ourselves, even when we don't want to. And maybe it means keeping praying, even when we don't feel like it, even when we might be overwhelmed. None of these things are easy. Just as that first step that Peter took, I can't imagine that was easy for him. None of these are easy, but the Lord invites us out. The Lord invites us to do these things that we might walk with Him, with that promise that if we falter, if we begin to sink, He will be there to reach out His hand to catch us and to raise us up. In that second reading, Paul is a bit discouraged because he's been preaching to the Jews and they are just not listening. They're choosing not to accept Jesus. It would have been very easy for Paul to run away, to hide and say, you know what, God, I tried, but it's just not going to happen. But with the grace of the Lord, Paul goes out to a whole new group of people. He goes out to the Gentiles and eventually will spread the good news of salvation to all the earth. It's the same with us. Even in those moments when we know what we need to do, but we don't know if we can do it, Jesus is there offering us grace, offering us the gifts of the Holy Spirit, that we might follow his will, that we might walk out in the midst of that storm. We know that life is not all that easy right now. Sometimes it's chaotic. There are raging storms in which we find ourselves all the time. But at the same time, we also know that Jesus is with us. We recognize Jesus is present among us, and he is here to walk with us, to raise us up, because he is faithful, and that's just how he is. Now, I know I'm the priest. I have to say things like this, right? But I want to offer something to you. If you don't believe this, simply look at the cross. Simply look at the Lord who went through a horrible storm. Jesus knows what we are going through because he went through trial. He went through pain. He went through death. But we also remember that the cross is not the final answer, that the resurrection gives us life. The resurrection is the promise that Jesus continues to be with us. He is with us in the storm because he knows what it means to walk out into the storm. And then in a few moments at the Eucharist, we will see body and blood made manifest in our presence. We will see Jesus present to us in a very special and very real way. The Lord comes to us in the Eucharist as that pledge and that promise that he will always be with us. And in that Eucharist, we should realize an image for our life, that Jesus is right here with us in every moment. Brothers and sisters, today we are invited, maybe even challenged, to never forget the words of Jesus in that raging storm. He says, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Let's remember at all times that Jesus is watching us, that Jesus is always with us.